Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Emily Lefevers from the Miami University Alumni Association. I'm excited to be joined today by Coach Hollie Bonewit-Cron, Miami University's head coach of men's and women's swimming and diving. Welcome, Hollie.
Thank you.
We will quickly get to your story and leadership advice, but first I want to give a quick introduction. Hollie enters her 7th year as the head coach of Miami Swimming and Diving in 2022 and 2023. She is a 3-time winner of the Mid-American Conference's Men's Swimming Coach of the Year Award, 2019, 2021, and 2022. Hollie earned a bachelor's degree in psychology from Ohio University and a master's degree in kinesiology with an emphasis in sports psychology from Georgia Southern University. She and her husband, Chad, have 2 daughters, Evelyn and Emerson, and a son, Easton. I also want to let our live viewers know that they can submit questions throughout the hour by using the Ask a Question button below the video. And with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So thank you for being here with us today, Hollie. I know you're currently in season and we're catching you just a few hours before practice. So we're excited that you're able to join us.
Well, I'm very excited to be here. Thank you so much, Emily, for having me.
Of course. So when you took over Miami in 2016, you became the first head coach of the newly combined RedHawks men's and women's program, making you the first female coach in Miami men's swim and dive history. And then in 2019, you became the first ever female coach to lead a men's team to a MAC conference championship in any sport when they captured the conference meet. So tell us about how you felt being a trailblazer for women's coaches.
Well, I think, primarily coming into Miami, I had some really big shoes to fill from the previous coaches. For the longest time, obviously, Pete Lindsay was a head coach of the men's team. And, Mark Davis was the women's coach. Prior to that was Dave Jennings, and so here we have these phenomenal coaches that have led this program for so many years that coming in as, the newly combined program head coach. And as a female coach on top of that, I felt as though it was very impactful, not only within our department, but especially around the country when there are so very few women coaches within our discipline in swimming and diving as head coaches. So I think it really is helping, myself and many others who are head coaches trailblaze the road for those who are maybe up and coming, newly into the sport, maybe have been in the sport for several years and want to take that step from being an assistant to a head coach. So I think that contributes to a lot of where maybe that trailblazing aspect can be.
When you took over a combined program, did you find yourself having to change your coaching style at all, or did it really not make a difference in the way that you coach?
Well, my previous experience had been with combined programs. So having had that experience for the vast majority of my coaching career, I don't feel like I had to change my coaching style very much at all. I think it was really just getting to know the current student athletes, the culture they were coming from, as far as being able to bridge that gap between being 2 separate programs and now becoming a newly combined program, which they were not as familiar with. So really how to develop a culture from the ground up, and what that would look like.
Well, thank you for that. So let's take a step back and kind of talk about how you got here in the first place. So what did you want to be when you grew up? And was swimming always a passion of yours, even as a kid?
But I have an anecdotal story to tell. When I was younger, my older brother was a phenomenal athlete. He was the second fastest butterflyer in the country to be recruited and was being recruited by the top colleges in the United States, ended up going to the University of Florida and was an All-American there. But as an age grouper, I really liked swimming, but I didn't love it. And when I got to middle school, I wanted to be with all my friends, and all my friends were playing volleyball, playing basketball, and doing cheerleading. So I gave up swimming for a period of time and tried out for volleyball, didn't make it. Tried out for basketball, definitely didn't make it. And cheerleading, didn't make that either. So I decided, let's go back to swimming. It seemed as though that was an inherent passion of mine. So that's how I really kind of grew up, got to where I was in terms of, loving swimming as a passion and still being able, when I entered high school, to follow my brother through his collegiate years.
So it seems like swimming you were kind of destined to coach and swim.
Yeah, exactly.
The coaches and volleyball and basketball coaches kind of made your mind up for you.
They did, and that's okay.
So you also swam in college, where you were an All-American and a 17-time Mid-American Conference champion. Wow, at Ohio University. Is there anything that stands out to you that you learned or took from your coach or coaches there?
One of the biggest things that I really felt like I was taught from, my head coach, who was Greg Werner. He was in his second year of being a head coach at Ohio University at the time. Is he really just tried to instill a level of belief. I know at one time he has an article. It's actually right behind me in a frame where he quoted, I guess, himself, but to say that I would drink battery acid if he asked me to do it. It was really just an investment in the program and a belief in the program and what he was doing. And that's really what kind of helped drive me through the years to want to be successful and to get to that level in which, sure, I was winning all those things for myself, but it was really about the team as well. And, that was what was really important too.
Great. So let's talk about your path to Miami. I know you were recently added to the Nova Southeastern University Hall of Fame for coaching, and you had some other stops along the way. So how did you eventually make your way to Oxford?
Well, I grew up in Athens, Ohio, actually, technically the Plains. If anyone's familiar with that area, I know Joe Burrow, his house is a stone's throw away from my childhood home. But long story short is that I swam at Ohio University. And when I got my master's degree in sports psychology, a lot of my cohorts were teaching assistants at Georgia Southern University. And so I wanted to be a graduate assistant coach. So I founded the GA position at Georgia Southern, and I became the graduate assistant coach. Halfway through my second year, I ended up becoming the interim head coach. From there, I was lucky enough to kind of meet up with the Florida coaches, and they were looking for a female assistant. They never had a female assistant on their combined staff. So I was going to be the first female assistant for Greg Troy, Anthony Nesty, who was an assistant, some other coaches that were there. And so I spent 6 years at the University of Florida. One of the most unique things about that experience is my first year at Florida was Ryan Lochte's freshman year. So flashback to all those years ago in 2002. And that was a really unique experience to see a barely junior national level athlete become the Olympian and world record holder that he became in some very short years. And so from there, my husband's job took us down to South Florida. It was a very smart family decision for us. And I volunteered a year at the University of Miami. I was also teaching ISR, infant swimming resource lessons. So we were just kind of clicking along down there, but I really didn't want to break in my resume, which is why I volunteered at the University of Miami. And then I wanted to get back into coaching. And lo and behold, Nova Southeastern was starting a brand new program from scratch. And it was a Division II program. And I thought, what better way to get my head coaching start than in Division II? And so I was hired on. My first year was spent recruiting athletes. And then after the end of those 7 years, we were fourth in the country on both sides and had 12 national champions at D2. From the moment I think even that I got back into swimming in high school, I knew I wanted to really be a Division I coach at some point. And so when Miami's position opened up, I kind of pulled out all the stops. It was Division I. It was a combined program, which, as I've explained it, I'm accustomed to. Nova Southeastern was also combined. And then it was closer to family. So it was closer to my family, my husband's family. And it was a program that I knew had a lot of great resources and a lot of really good support. And I'd always been following it. I did know that it was an arch rival to my alma mater, and my my friends still kind of give me a little bit of a hard time about that. But I really thought and still think, of course, that this was a really good decision to bring our family up from Florida to come to Oxford, and extremely happy that that was the decision we made.
Well, we are lucky to have you, and we're excited that you're here. So let's get into some of your ABCs of your coaching and leadership advice. And I'm sorry if you guys can hear my dogs in the background. So over your 21-year coaching career, there are definitely some lessons you've learned and principles you've used as a foundation for your program during the past half dozen seasons in Oxford. You've mentioned before that you often get emails from coaches, some male, some female, looking for advice on how to build or a team or lead a program. So when looking at an article from one of your past interviews, the writer referred to the advice you gave as the ABCs of H.B.C. So let's go through a few of those. We'll just do the ABC. The first piece of advice was authenticity. So you mentioned that a former athletic director said the most important thing is being yourself. So how do you instill this piece of advice into your student athletes? And most importantly, how do you make sure that you practice it yourself?
Well, it's a little bit multifaceted. That former athletic director was Jeremy Foley, who was the head athletic director at the University of Florida, and he's always been a very good confidant of mine to help me with the interview process for this position. And he said, "Just be yourself. Just be yourself, and if they want you, they're going to like you, and they're going to want to bring you on, and they're exactly what you're looking for." So it's really important to be authentic. I think that comes into a professional life. And also with that professional life, it's going to bleed into the way I coach as well. And the way I coach is going to be authentic. I think honesty is the most important thing. And so when I'm talking to athletes, they're going to get the true, authentic, honest self and part of me as a coach. That means that when I'm really happy with something, I'm going to be excited and they're going to see that, see that authenticity. When I'm not happy with something or I need to, talk to them about ways to be better, they know that too. They know that it's coming from a place of genuineness and that I really, truly want to see the best in them. So when I do instill it in athletes, it's really by leading by example so that if they see my authentic self, I hope that they can practice it themselves. I hope that they can see that when they're honest with me in practice and they give me, the goods, the good, bad, and differences, that I really, truly see their authenticity. And so I think it just really goes hand in hand with not only, how I coach and mentor, but how these athletes respond to that as well.
I'm sure with you being authentic and you encouraging them to be themselves as well has really, truly grown your team closer to each other and to you as a coach, which is so nice to be able to know that you can go to your coach with anything that you need to, whether it's about sports or personal things. It's nice to have that comfortability. So you and your husband, Chad, have 3 young children. You're also coaching a winning collegiate team, and your husband works the week in Chicago. So our B is balance. And it's something that you have found is important to maintain your life. So how do you find the balance between your personal and professional life?
Well, that's a lot to unravel. I'll give some context to this. My husband Chad and I, we have a 10-year-old, 8.5-year-old. Those are 2 girls, and a 3-year-old son. My husband does live and work in Chicago during the week, and he comes home on the weekends. And it is a balance. I will tell you, I have spreadsheets for our nannies that come into the house because, truth be known, I have to carve out time for myself, and I do it, and I'm religious about it. I really need to, and it helps keep me balanced mentally and physically. So while some people kind of think I'm a little bit crazy and off my rocker, I get up at 3:30 in the morning to work out. That is really the only time I can commit to where my children are still asleep. I get my workout in the basement, and then I wait for the nanny to come at 5:30. Practice starts at 6, and we're rocking and rolling in the office, and trying to get our work done and everything like that. I come home, and I'm also, responsible for picking up my youngest from daycare and making sure that the kids are being fed. I do have nannies that help transport our children to their various activities when I can't do it. And then I don't have to put them to bed every night. I get to put them to bed every night. And that's important to me. That's why I don't do my workouts at night. I want to invest in my children and want them to see that their mother and father too, of course, but their mother is ambitious and really is doing the best for the family. And I want them to see me hardworking so I can try to showed them how to be hardworking as well, and that everything does take some balance. Now, no, I don't wake up at 3:30 every single morning. It really, Sundays, I try to sleep in a little bit, but the 3-year-old wakes me up a lot. I think the balance is something that's important. For me, it's working out. For other people, it may be something different. And I think it's really important to really carve out that time. I will say that even in my schedule that I have for work, I actually take a data entry or a calendar entry, and it says workout, so that time is carved out. I also take the hour before practice and I block that off, so I at least get an hour to decompress so that no meetings are scheduled before practice. So that's how I think I do some balancing acts, with my schedule. And sometimes it does get challenging, especially when I travel and maybe say my husband's out of town as well. But we make it work. A lot of people actually, they ask me, how do you do it? Like, how do you manage it all and how do you do it? And my answer to that is I never thought I couldn't. And so that's where I really kind of stem that balance and trying to be a good role model for my children.
Wow, that's a lot. And I really like your two pieces of advice too within that, the I get to, I don't have to, and the I never thought I couldn't. Those are two really good mindsets that I think can not even just with like dealing with our children in our everyday life, but kind of putting that into everything we do. Do you often find yourself taking work home with you? Or are you able to, once you get home with your kids, push aside your other kids, your college kids, and focus on your kids?
I do take work home with me, because again, if I'm being my full authentic self, I want to be able to reach out to recruits. More importantly, if I have a student athlete that needs something, I do not want to put guardrails on when they can contact me. Sometimes I'll get messages at 3 o'clock in the morning that they're throwing up, right? If they have an illness or maybe something else. And so I want to be there for them. And, I think that that's going to be really important to just show my best self. So I do take work home with me. But there are times, where I do budget that. When I go on vacation, there's a specific vacation our family goes on in the summers. And I work in the mornings up until 11 a.m. and then I shut my phone off. And I don't answer messages because I'm technically on vacation. But outside of that, I think it's really important to be there for your student athletes, for my coaching staff. This machine doesn't work without my coaching staff. And I have to mention that there is no question that putting together, a staff is super impactful and important, not only for myself, but especially for these student athletes to know that they have other assets and other mentors that they can go to and support systems along with myself. And so I can't say enough about my staff. And they're the ones who take a lot of the brunt of the work home with them by calling, the recruits and doing some work at home. So I would say we have some shared responsibilities. I do try to be there as much for my kids as possible so that, they're not seeing the working mom at home, just like, my kids here, my athletes don't see the working mom at practice, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. And that's a really good balance. I like that you're still there for your athletes when you're with your kids, but it's still nice that you're giving your kids your full attention when you are home with them. Okay. And let's get to our C's. So you obviously left OU with some amazing accomplishments and records in the pool, but you mentioned that you weren't always that successful in swimming prior to college, and that commitment is what really led you to those improvements. So what does commitment look like to you?
Well, I would think, not would think, but I definitely think that this is kind of, again, another multifaceted answer is that I wasn't very good coming out of college. In fact, I was awful. And I tried to go to some Power 5 schools and I just wasn't good enough. And going to OU could not have been one of the better decisions I made, and embraced it all. But the way I embraced it was through a level of discipline. And for me, discipline is really important. That's why when we go back to the be in balance, the discipline goes into making sure I wake up at those, 3:30 alarms and not go back to sleep. sticking to a schedule, being task oriented, being budgeting my time accordingly, whether that's for my athletes here, whether that's for my staff, whether that's for even just work professional obligations, and then also for my family and my children, my husband. So I think the commitment has to be ever evolving, but it always boils down to discipline and a high level of ambition. Really waking up each morning and saying, what do I want to accomplish today? Where do I see myself going today? It's the attitude and effort. We talk, my husband and I, we talk to our kids about the A&E. As you start your morning, where's your attitude? Where's your effort? And that's going to just shape your day and shape your week and maybe shape your month and year. So I think that those pieces go a lot into the commitment level, but it really boils down to being disciplined. One of my mentors is Anthony Nestes. Nestes, currently the head coach of Florida, but he was, assistant along with me when I was there. And really every day, he would ask me a question like, Hollie, did you run today? This was back in when we were working together. And on, occasional days I would say no. And he'd say, why not? And just point blank look at me. And, I would say, that's a good question. Why not? So I think the discipline and the commitment go hand in hand. And then finally, just to wrap that up, I do kind of have a little internal mantra that if you are disciplined, you won't have to be disciplined. And so I think that's really important. Something that I just put through my mind is just always staying, committed and disciplined, which I'm using those words a lot right now, but committing it to everything you do in your life, personally and professionally.
I like that we got a little C and D in there. We got a little extra. So can you force commitment into your student athletes, or is that something that you believe they need to develop themselves?
I don't think you can force commitment. I think they will develop it themselves, but I think they have to have a really concrete understanding as to what they're committing to and why. So, we are very open-minded coaches, and very growth oriented, where with our growth mindset, we're going to want to answer questions they have, want to be able to teach them why their commitment is important and what they may get out of that commitment. I think that could go into anybody's, I guess their pursuits, right? Their pursuits professionally, even personally, is you got to know what the commitment is, why you're doing it. And then I think that investment will be there.
Okay, so thank you so much for taking us through your ABCs and everything, the advice and everything that goes with that. I think that these are things that we can definitely apply to our own lives and careers. And even if people watching aren't or weren't athletes, they're applicable to everything we do. So before we wrap up, or before we jump into our live questions from our audience, we want to hear about some of your most memorable career moments. So what would you say is your most memorable thing that's happened to you at Miami so far, or your favorite memory with your team? It doesn't even have to be your biggest accomplishment. Just your favorite thing that's happened so far.
It's really hard to narrow down. There's so many exciting things from the day I stepped foot on this campus to everything I get to see on this campus, to the people I've met have been tremendous. I mean, the friendships professionally, even personally, I could narrow it down, to a couple things. I would say the first championship we won was pretty memorable, knowing that I had big shoes to fill on both sides. I mean, there's multiple championships on both sides, and to win that first championship, and I'm going to glance over to the trophies in my office right now, they're good reminders. And I think it's humbling to know that we've come this far and we have a lot of challenges in front of us, but that we're always eager and ambitious to want to achieve those. So the first championship, we've had a lot of success on not only the men's side, but the women's side as well. I mean, just to see the academic progress that both teams, but especially the women, have been making, they crush it in the classroom. We've had our first swimming NCAA qualifier last year with Nicole Meyer. Prior to that, Sarah Palin, one of our divers, was an NCAA All-American. we've had a lot of success on both sides of the coin, and on both the men's and women's programs, and in the water and on the boards. So I think that's really important, and it's hard to narrow down just one of those, but I would say those would be the most impactful things.
Yeah, they all sound like it. And I'm sure it is really hard to really just come up with one. All right, so we have had several live questions come in. A few came in with registration, so we'll go ahead and get to those. So our first one is, Coach Hollie, I see that you often use the hashtag full tilt. How did you come up with this, and what does it mean to you?
Well, I use it a lot, and it was something I came up with probably about 2 years ago. I actually, my best friend got me a bracelet, so I wear the full tilt on my wrist every day. And what it means to me is pushing all your chips in, pushing them in every single day, whatever that commitment is. I mean, that commitment could be the 3:30 a.m. that I wake up to, or whatever someone else's commitment is. Maybe that's crushing a dinner, right? Okay, I'm going to make this recipe. I'm going to go all in on it. It's really about putting your best self forward and really not hedging your bets and pushing all these chips in. I think it's about taking chances and living life to its fullest, whatever that may be. Not passing up opportunities because of being fearful of outcomes. Go see what it is. At some point, you may fail, but you're never going to know if you fail or succeed if you don't try. So that's what full tilt really means to me.
Great. So someone wants to know, what are the pros, in your opinion, of having a combined women's and men's team with one coaching staff? And are there any unique challenges of coaching both women and men?
I think, from the bare bones from it all, when you have a combined program, the NCAA permits 6 coaches on staff. That would be a head swimming coach, a head diving coach, okay, and the rest would be assistant coaches. We currently have 5, which is great. So we get a solid number of coaches on our deck. With a single gender, you have a head coach and assistant, and then you would have a diving coach that you would maybe share with a men's program if the teams were separate, right? So before I came in, the teams were separate. There's a head coach and assistant, and then they shared the diving coach. So, you do get a little bit more flexibility when you're able to come up to the number of coaches with a combined program rather, and the maximum being 6. I think the pros of it all, and I can only speak to the pros, right? Because, I think seeing it each and every day is always a positive thing, and seeing what I get to see with how they interact, how they manage conflict, how they have fun together and develop their culture. One of the things I like to talk to recruits about is when you are in a combined program, it's really unique because maybe you are doing some, intergender communication that you may experience in a professional world when you get into that realm. And so I do like to put such a good positive spin on it. I don't think there's any negatives to the single gender setup at all. I just really think that a combined program also allows for our athletes to kind of mutually be competitive with one another, not only, intergender, but between the genders, inter. And so you have, the women who want to try to keep up with the men, right? And then the men who maybe don't necessarily want the women to pass them or beat them. And so you have situations along those lines where you're breaking down maybe some gender barriers. And so I think it's important for our athletes to be in a program where they're able to get this experience and to be able to build a culture within a combined program.
Great. And then more on your team. He said, in following the team on social media, it appears that you have a very positive culture. So how would you describe the culture, and how important is it to the team's overall success? And then he says, thank you, and go RedHawks.
RedHawks, love and honor. Yeah, our team culture is not smoke and mirrors on social media. That is what it is. Again, the authenticity comes into place and into place in this. But when we're talking about our culture, we like to organically create a culture where everyone feels supported. The support is kind of the bottom line expectation, right? We want that support. I think ways in which we continue to develop the culture, and especially through the season, is we do some interactive things, not only separately, men's team, women's team, but also together. So, the men's team might go do paintball within themselves, and the women's team might have a movie night. But, collectively, they may be doing a bake-off, and the women are, making all the goodies, and then the men are the taste testers. And so it kind of ends up being a really fun inter-team competition. They do their own separate scavenger hunts, and it's really fun to see them kind of have these scavenger hunts. Actually, one of the things on their scavenger hunt is to come to a TikTok with my kids at my house. So we make it really interactive. But when I say we make it, we as coaches, kind of set the precedence for the culture, but we want the team to run the culture. Our captains, we have the team elect those captains so that we know that they're the people that this team supports. And we want these captains to do a really good job in leading the team. And that's going to help them professionally later down the road as well, because they're elected in that position because they are good leaders. So I think that's what's really important about making sure that our culture is set up well by the coaching staff. That's why we have a level of expectations, and some rules that we need to follow. But within those expectations, that's where we want the team to be able to drive that culture.
We have a lot of good questions coming in. So we'll have to filter through some of them, but we do have so many good ones coming in. I'm excited.
Good.
So given your background in sports psychology, I'm curious how you balance coaching the technical and mental aspects of performance.
Well, that question is a great one. I sometimes it also gets phrased into how do the men's teams and women's teams differ, right? So when I use the sports psychology and what I do, it's really just a individualized thing. It could be, it's really not genderized, it's individualized. So I try to use that on a daily basis, really looking at the calls and tells of our athletes. When they walk into practice, what do they look like? What is their body language saying? On at least one practice a day, I'm going to walk over to an athlete saying, is everything okay? This morning I walked up to 2. Is everything okay today? Yep, I'm just tired and I'm just a little bit fatigued and the week is just kind of getting to me. Oh, good. We have recovery day today, so I can kind of put a positive spin on it. If it's something a little bit more deeper, then we have a private conversation. And sometimes I'll pull one of my coaches into the office and have them sit in on it too, just so we can get a real good understanding. A lot of times I'll repeat back what the athlete's saying to me, just so that what I'm receiving is exactly what they intended for me to hear. No different than if I'm working with them and if we're having a difficult conversation, I say, well, okay, I've said all these things. Tell me what that means to you. How did you receive that? So that I'm understanding exactly how they are receiving it, because every athlete is different, and I have to treat every athlete different, just in the standpoint of what they need, okay, and what they respond to. And if they're not responding to certain, ways that I'm coaching them, we need to talk through that and we need to get to a place where they are responding to it.
Great. And this question has a little bit of a long background, but I think it's something that you can relate to. And it's a good question. So my daughter is 11 and an excellent multi-sport athlete. Although she was a high school level JO swimmer, she took a year off to play basketball and volleyball. She actually played really well, but not to the level she achieved swimming. Do you have any advice on encouraging her to get back into the pool? Swimming can be a grind, and I'm not sure how to motivate her to pick up such a difficult and time-consuming sport. So just how to motivate his 11-year-old daughter to get back in the pool.
Yeah, no, I love it. And, congrats. She made the volleyball and basketball team. That's way further than I ever got. No, I think what's important, start small. I've dealt with this with my 2 younger daughters. I put them in swimming, and it wasn't a lot, right? But it was enough where they were going 2 days a week, 3 days a week eventually. I really think swimming, as you spoke about, is a grinding sport. keeping it fun is one of the most important things about swimming. I mean, think about this, right? They're all looking at the bottom of a pool or maybe up at the ceiling on backstroke. But when it's fun and they're engaged in it and they love the friends they're around and they're with a coach that they love, they're going to want to do it more. And she's going to want to be a part of it more, especially the fun at meets. I think swim meets as an age grouper is one of the most fun experiences I ever had. I don't know if anyone remembers the Mad Libs, but I used to do that all the time when I was an age grouper. Bring something fun for her to do or for her and her teammates to do while they're waiting for their events in between. And, just maybe dial it back a little bit, start small, keep her involved in some other sports. I think that's a positive experience. I think doing multi-sports is really beneficial for kids. That's just my personal opinion. I have our middle daughter who's really into hockey and our oldest daughter who loves ice skating. So I think it's going to be important to keep them involved maybe in some other sports along with swimming. But I would start small and then go from there. And I think most importantly, letting her drive that conversation, but having the questions you may ask her be open-ended. How do you like swimming? What's fun about it? And so maybe getting some feedback from her will help her see really, the importance of swimming and really how fun it can be.
So some more advice, that was great advice, but some more advice for people wanting to get further into swimming. Do you have any tips for high school swimmers who want to swim at the Division I level in college?
Yeah, I think we go back to the ambition. A lot of times we'll get outreach through emails. Some athletes will go with a recruiting service, and we will get contacted by the recruiting service. Whatever the scenario may be, having that enthusiastic athlete come our way is going to be really nice to just converse with when it's permissible to start talking to them via email, via texting, and then via phone call. To see that excitement in their voice or to hear it in their voice is going to be a really great step forward. I think also having their club coaches call us is also going to reiterate some of what we look for, which is what kind of characteristics do we want to build our culture, right? If we're recruiting an athlete, they're recruiting us as well. It goes both ways. So what kind of characteristics are we bringing into our team as well that's going to help us really want to go after an athlete to be part of our program? And so I think communication is going to be critical, and then multiple levels of communication. And then more importantly, and just to get down to the nitty gritty, if you are emailing, make sure to include my assistants as well, just so that we're all seeing the same thing. It really just helps iron out some of the communication in our weekly staff meetings when we're talking about the recruitable athletes.
And some coaching advice now for people wanting to advice for people wanting to get into coaching. So she says, what advice do you have for someone interested in coaching as a career path, not necessarily only swimming, but sports coaching in general?
I like that question because my older brother really taught me a lot about being a sponge and absorbing everything you can. I'm still learning even after this is my 22nd year now that I'm in. And I think it's important that I still learn and that you're always kind of soaking up the knowledge that you are given. And with any sport, with any coaching realm, I think and I'm going to speak specific to our discipline. In swimming and diving, we have a convention. We have two conventions. We have the College Swim Coaches Association of America convention that we go to in May. And then there's also the American Swim Coaches Association, which is open to club and college. So that's also going to be, I believe it's in September. But specific to the coaching realm that you're in, look up where those conferences are, because I think you can learn a lot by going to some of those conventions. And the biggest piece will be to network and not being afraid to go up to maybe assistant coaches, head coaches, kind of bending their ear. From time to time, I'll have assistant coaches reach out to me and say, can I just ask you a few questions about what you do, why you do it, maybe how to get into coaching, who can you connect me with? I always make time for those coaches. So I wouldn't be timid in trying to reach out to maybe some confidants or colleagues. And maybe it's through a network. Maybe you know someone who knows someone else that can get you connected to the people who can really help teach you a lot about where you want to go.
And one last question. What is the biggest question? Well, it's kind of a two-parter. But the last one. What is the biggest challenge that you face in your role, and what support has meant the most to you in your role?
Ooh, that's a good one. If I'm being perfectly candid, authentic, right? Um, Sometimes people don't realize I'm the head coach, especially when I have an all-male assistant coach staff. So breaking through some of those barriers has been a little bit challenging. I take it in stride, right? You don't know what you don't know. So if they don't know that I'm the head coach, here's a great opportunity for me to teach them and to teach them what it's taken to get to this point in my career. And I think that's important. I would say that's probably one of my bigger challenges that I face. And so I embrace it, honestly. It's important for me to educate. So I think that when I get asked that question, it's important for me to provide that education rather than maybe being put off by it. Um, Emily, will you explain the second part of that question? I sort of lost track.
Yeah. It said, where was it? What support has meant the most to you in your role?
I think the support I get from some of my colleagues that are within our sport, some of the older coaches around the country. I knew them as a young puppy getting into coaching, and so they're always my backbone of support. But the people at Miami, I mean, I've made some tremendous friendships here, and not only in the athletic realm, but in the faculty realm too. And the friendships I've made, I can tell you that it really helps to be able to have a level of support from those individuals that understand what we're all going through, and whether that's through a pandemic or whether that's just through our day-to-day lives. I think the support that we get at Miami is really impactful, and it's really helping each other, right? Giving support and also receiving support. So I think those aspects in my life are what's really helped me be able to succeed.
Great. And it looks like we're wrapping up and almost out of time. So thank you so much for your time today, Hollie. It was truly a pleasure to talk to you. And the advice you shared was wonderful, and is something that we can all apply to our own lives.
Thank you.
So just a reminder that you can check out all of our upcoming webinars, including our special Winter College Week presentations happening on the week of February 13th through the 17th. We'll have 7 different webinars every day that week. Oh, and you can find it, there we go, at our website, alumlc.org/MiamiOH. Thank you again, Hollie, and thank you to everyone that tuned in and asked questions. Have a great rest of your day, and love and honor.